Hi, I'm Cindy Wallace with the Amarillo Public Library, and today we're going to investigate the ancient art of quilling and produce a quilled key pendant. Guys, quilling is a really affordable craft in that it only uses a few basic supplies and most all of them can be found around the house. It's true, we do have a quilling kit at the makerspace at the library, and we would love to have you come in and let us show you how to use the supplies, all of which are free. With your library card, you're welcome in the makerspace, but I also wanted you to know that everything you see me doing, I am also doing at home with regular supplies, and these are the kinds of things we're going to use for the project today for a quilled key pendant. A waxed paper plate. I actually have wax paper on my paper plate. A glue stick or two, little tiny drops of glue are needed. If you don't have a little tiny stick of glue, just get regular Elmer's glue, and I often make a puddle of glue that I dip a toothpick in. So you might want some toothpicks, if you have them, things like pencils, barbecue skewers, things that you can roll paper around to produce coils and rolls like we're going to need for the project today. So quilling, you don't always have to have store-bought tools. We do have a real nice quilling kit in the public library's makerspace, but you can totally do this at home with found objects. The paper itself can be store-bought, or it can come cut out of a book that you're no longer using. We have basement library sales where we often sell books that I use for my folded book projects and quilling projects. And then I wanted to just leave with you the idea of where quilling came from, which was rolling paper around a feather tip. These are feathers I've picked up along the way, and I wanted you to see that rolling paper, whether it's on a pencil or a little tiny feather like a toothpick, everything you need, you've got at home. So the idea behind quilling is so simple. This is a beginner level. I will be teaching you some basic steps for quilling, but I wanted you to see what we're going after today as far as a quilled key pendant. We're going to learn basic steps. I'm going to walk you through each one. There's only about 4, and you're going to love it. So to get started, we're going to take about a 2-inch wide, 10-inch long piece of paper because I want to make a barrel. I'm going to roll it around a pencil and just glue the outside edge when I'm done to produce the barrel. Okay, this is step 1. There's not but a couple of steps in the whole project. It's fun, it's easy, and you can use anything in your home. Like this is where I cut up a dowel rod, but you could use a pencil just as easily as a cut up dowel rod. Almost everything I'm going to show you today could be used with scraps laying around the house. The first step is to roll your paper. So I'm going to do a tiny bit of glue, smear it because I want it partially dry. I'm going to start rolling the opposite end. Get it on camera. All I'm going to do is take this is the height of a book, so it's roughly 10 inches. You can do shorter or longer. The reason I want this to be about 10 inches long and about 2 inches wide is that I'm going to turn this particular sample into a quilled key pendant. So you'll be able to see me. I'm just gently rolling, and I am watching the edges right here. I want to try to keep those as level as possible. It doesn't matter if they're a tiny bit off. It's going to be covered up anyway, but it matters to me that it's nice and neat as much as possible as we go. So I'm just continuing to roll around the dowel. I am not gluing to the dowel. I already put just a tiny bit of glue right here on this paper, and you can see this is very, very small amounts of glue because you will want to have wet rags, something like that, nearby so that you can gently wipe off any excess glue because you don't want it to show. It shows particularly on dark pieces of colored paper. I'm using excess book pages from where I've done my folded book projects, but you could easily use other colored papers. You can even order it at different places online. But that roll right there is what I'm after. That's the first step in the quilled key part. It's a little different than some of my traditional quilling. You saw that I just slipped the dowel rod out, and now I have a coil of paper that I'm going to use to build step 2. So now that we have a barrel built, we have the building blocks started. So I'm going to take 1/4 inch wide by about 8 to 10 inches, 2 strips. I'm going to need those to put my caps on each end of my barrel. And I'm literally going to be rolling them around my barrel in order to produce a capped in barrel that we're going to use to produce our key. So guys, this is step 2. This is what the finished product of 2 will look like. See these bands on each end of the barrel? So easy. That's what we're going to do next. I'm just going to put this aside. This is the one we just finished, and all I've got is about a 1/4 inch strip, in this case, of plain paper, and I'm literally going to use the barrel that we just made and wrap around it to create this part of the decoration. I'm going to put a little glue here so that it stays in place. I want to just barely cover up the exterior of where I rolled it up, but it's going to be covered up anyway when we put more decoration on it. But I want you to see I'm gently using the barrel and rolling my strip of paper, and I have to manipulate it and keep it snug, but I'm literally rolling a piece of paper. I'm going to do that on both ends, so stick with me for just a moment because I want to complete this and show you that this is so quick and so fun and easy. So now I'm working on my barrel, and these are just pieces of decor on these bands that are at each end. You can look, I can slide it around to position it just a little bit. And I'm going to snug it up, working my way to the end. Tap it down just a little bit with the fingers and glue it in place. And I'm literally going to do this on both ends. So just a second 1/4 inch thick piece of paper glued to the other end so that your barrel now has 2 bands, one at each end. So this is where the fun creative steps start to come in. I know we're roughly halfway through, but this step will take you a little longer than the first 2 steps. This time we're going to work on the top of the quilled key pendant. You're definitely going to need some plain old straight pins, as you'll see on my board, to help hold things in place. I'm going to teach you about scale and why it's important. So I'm going to tilt this your way just a little bit so you can see that I very carefully considered where my pieces are going to be and how big they're going to be. I considered this for the top of my key, but this is too big. We're going to cover this in scale, and I wanted you to see how I really do pin things down in this most important step, because this is my focal point, and I think this is a great place for you to continue working. Then we'll get to the last little step, is to put the last few pieces on the bottom of the key. This is going to be step 3 for the quilled key pendant. I'll put this right here where I think it'll be pretty much on camera and show you that I'm using a strip of paper and a quilling tool. Keep in mind that all of these tools are available in the Amarillo Public Library's new maker space. I had slipped the piece of paper into a tiny little groove on this tool, and I'm gently rolling it around, and it's going to be quite a bit. This is the length of the height of a book, so it's about 10-inch long strip. Most of mine are 8 to 16 inches that I quill, and this is just rolling. But you'd like to see this, and you'll like how I teach this, I think. I just gently pulled it off, and I've chosen a hole that I'm going to put it in, and it's what I call letting it get happy. So if you'll notice that right here, the paper continues to expand after I sit it down. and it opens up a little bit. It's exactly what I want it to do. Everything I'm using except for the actual quilling tool, which does have a slit in it, pretty much household items. Watch how I use a toothpick to help him get happy and expand before I glue him down, to show you how I made all the pieces that we're going to use today. So I'm helping him stretch out, and I literally do a bunch up and fill these up, and I do different shapes all the time. I have successes and failures, so I'll show you some of each. In that, you can see that I've made shapes to go in the quilling board, and some are successes, some are not so successful. In that, this heart is a little wonky. I had to use a filler roll of quilling. I wanted it to be a banded heart. So in this case, I made an outer band of one color, and I used some other shapes to create a half and a half put together for a heart. Really, the sky's the limit. If you can think of a fold that you want to try, from a teardrop to a triangle to a coil, whether an open coil or a filled coil like this, which is the one I just showed you how to do, or an open coil, depending on what you're going to use your product for. Sometimes it's just for a birthday card. The key that I'm working on, we kind of designed those to be used for earrings or a necklace. So I'm going to put that aside for a minute and show you that the quilled pieces that I'm pointing at right here, this was what we first created. There's step 1 and 2 together. And then I wanted to teach you something about scale, in that it matters to me when I'm creating. The pieces are going to be, they're going to be pretty big by the time I'm around the top of the key, which is this step, step 3. And look at the scale of this as if I were going to glue it to that barrel. Now look at the scale of this, which I decided was too big. So I'm going to get it in place. And do you see how that's really too big for the scale of that barrel? By the time I add on my extra pieces, the top of my key is going to be a little too big for me. So I considered him not quite right, but I'll save him. I made a slightly smaller one, and I glue him. And how I do that is I literally pick up the barrel and I glue all the way around the edge of the barrel. It's not a large amount. It does dry clear. It's waterproof. It washes out if you get it on your clothes. Although I would recommend using wax paper on a paper plate, because I did have some earrings actually get glued to a paper plate. And it has to sit there a little while with the glue on it. And sometimes I let it dry for about 10 minutes before I start adding the next pieces. So you can see how these are smaller, just a little bit smaller, and I'm going to position them as if we were gluing them so that I can show you what is part 3. This step, I would very much recommend that you do the top of the key first. It's not an ironclad rule. I planned this teardrop shape, which is nothing more than, let me grab a circle. It's just a circle, that teardrop right there. I watch where the center is, but I gently pinch one side or the other, and I'm choosing that side because I'm watching my circle. So I want the circle of the teardrop to be in a certain position so that I can put him there. I want that to be the top of my key pendant or necklace so that I can put a jump ring through there, just like a regular piece of jewelry. So he would work just as well. He's a little taller, but I'm looking for a little space right there that I can have sturdy space to run a jump ring through to make a necklace. Now, do you see how there are some empty spaces right there? You could leave them. Negative space isn't bad, but my tendency was to fill them. So I rolled more coils, this time out of the edge of the book page that I was working with, and they're little tiny. So I've got them on a pin, and I rolled them really tight on my quilling tool, but I'm using those, as you can see, if I glue them in place. And I glue little tiny dots of glue on the edges. By the time I get a couple of those in place, like that, and I do put everything in place first, then glue it down to make sure I don't need extra pieces to fill something. But you see how I have to be gentle, but I'm using those as filler. I can roll it up a little bit. There. Now that looks like a good use of negative space. It's negative space here and here. I've considered the scale of things and gradually go smaller so that my top of my key pendant doesn't get too big. And this is what you would like for it to look like, only your style. Roll, whether it's rolls, teardrops, marquees, any shape you want. It could be a square. I did one that I considered for the video where I did a square that I considered for the top of the key, but I decided in the end to go with round rather than square because everything I've got is round, so I stayed with the round. So I put him aside. He was on the board we showed earlier. And that's the end of step 3. Next we'll do the step 4, which is the bottom of the pendant. So now we're going to do the final step as far as building the quilled key pendant. In this step, we're going to put the teeth, which are actually called the bit. My friend and I that do quilling a lot here at the library, we tend to call these pieces the teeth, but the real name is the bit on a key. So I wanted to show you, it's so easy. These are going to be pinched. I'll show you how to take a nice circle with the eye of the circle in a certain place. It's real important because I don't want to pinch the middle of my key off. We're going to make coiled barrels that are very similar to the barrel of the key, and we're going to put some bits or teeth, whatever you want to call them, into the final stage of making our quilled key pendant. So this is pretty easy. It's the final little leg of our rolling or quilling, which used to be called filigree. Historically, this goes back to the 14 and 1500s, but now I'm going to show you a piece, this long coil like this. Do you see how that barrel is very much like the barrel of the original piece that we did in step 1? All I did was take about a 1/2 inch piece of paper, something along that line would work, and I'm going to quill it or pick up one of my quilling tools. These come in different sizes. All but one of them has a slot in it. Try this and see if I can make it work on this slot, because see how that's shorter? Let me grab, if I can spot it, a longer one. I know what I'll do. I'll show you what I use at home. So I have many pieces, different sizes of this in the makerspace at the Amarillo Public Library. But honestly, at home, I'm going to show you my Cindy Cheater step. So I have a longer quilling tool, and it works the same way, except I'm going to punch a little button. It's battery operated, and it kind of rolls it up for me. So then I've got, on almost instant, lazy man's coil. Do you see once again the scale? Like if I'm going to work on the bottom of the key right here, let me glue that piece together for you so you can see. I think this one is way too big for the finished product on my quilling because it takes away from the top, which to me is the focal point of the key. But if I put that there, do you see how that large piece doesn't function quite as well as that scale of piece? So to me, this is quite a bit too big. It's more than half smaller. So I built another coil. That was the idea, is to build a very tight coil. Look at that. See how that's just full of paper? Well, that's a nice, strong, tight coil. And I would next I'm not gluing because I haven't got my other pieces yet, but I would put him in. I would say, oh, that scale looks good. Then I know that I want to add a couple of pieces that are called teardrop shapes, and I have to plan where I'm going to put them. So I'm going to show you what to consider. These are as if you were going to use a key to open a door. So I want to teach you to consider whether this bigger piece in your work would be on the outside and that would be smaller. This is why we look before we glue, or whether it be more like this with the bigger piece at the back. There's not a right or wrong. It's your piece of art. You decide, and then put a little tiny drop of glue right there and around the barrel, and glue them into place. Now you may see that I've got pins all stuck in this board. You can use a washcloth, a towel, or a piece of cork board like a bulletin board if you've got one of those. But when I get them glued, I wanted to demonstrate to you that I let them get happy once again, and I literally call it getting happy. You see how I'm putting pins everywhere? That is because it does two things. It holds it in shape after I glue the little tiny drops of glue. It also lets the paper sit there, and I let it sit at least 24 hours. I truly do on all of my projects. I can't rush them because those pieces of paper have memory. Sorry, I'll get him back in place. The paper has memory, and I need it to sit there, whether it's on my my quilling board or in a finished design. Well, just watch Cindy chase that around. Okay, so now I have him on the pin. I'm going to get him in place, and I not only slid him to the bottom, but I pinned at the same time. So this is what you should be looking at the end of step 4. Everything is now done. We've got to let it dry, and then I'll give you some finishing remarks. So this turned out to be a quick, fun, and pretty easy little art and craft project, no matter what the age. I really enjoy quilling. This is your finished product after you've created your quilled key pendant. As you can see, you can put it on a pair of earring bases, you could put a chain through it, or you could add a jump ring and put a thin leather coil through. So there's some variety in how you might choose to wear it. I have one big tip for you. When I got finished with my paper piece that I showed you today, I actually sprayed it with crystal clear varnish, and I did 2 light coats per side so that it could withstand some humidity and some handling coming in and out of the jewelry box as well. And then I wanted to mention to you, if you could, hit like if you liked our videos. If you want to receive more notifications, let us know that on the subscribe, or hit the little bell and we'll send you notifications when we have more tutorials coming out. Thank you so much, guys.